Hello, hello, hello. I would like to welcome you to the University of Oregon in Portland. I am Donna Davis, Director of the Strategic Communication Master's Program here, which is part of the School of Journalism and Communication, where we host two graduate programs, one in Strategic Communication, and where are my students tonight? Woohoo! There's a few of them, or graduates of the program, a few of them as well, and the Multimedia Journalism Program. If you want to know more about our master's program, all right, she's not in the room, but Stacy with the blue blouse outside at the table afterwards will be here to answer any questions that you might have. So we are really, really thrilled to be talking about this topic when we've done this event the last 3 years. And when the folks from MaxList came this year, we immediately said, we want to talk about disruption. Because one of the things that we're finding in our business is that, as I saw an ad recently that said, if you're doing business the way you were 3 years ago, you'll be out of a job in 3 years, and 2 of those years will be sympathy years. So that's how quickly things are changing. And we're trying to address that in our program. We're trying to address that in the industry. And so I'm really excited to hear from our leaders tonight and to be here with Mac, who's going to tell us more about what we're going to be doing tonight. So, Mac Pritchard, thank you.
Great. Well, thanks, Donna. Well, first of all, how about a big round of applause for our host tonight, the University of Oregon? What do you say? All right, and there are some other people I want to acknowledge, but first, how about a big round of applause for those snacks in that open bar? How many networking events do you get that quality of food, huh?
A potato bar.
A potato bar.
Yeah.
I mean, you're raising the bar, so to speak, so much for all of us. I don't know if we're going to be able to meet those high standards. I didn't see this in the Ivy League. So I'm Mac Pritchard. I'm the founder and publisher of MaxList. I want to thank you for joining us for tonight's panel. It's our topic is communications careers in the era of disruption. I'm curious, quick show of hands, how many people have visited the MaxList website in the last month? Okay, maybe about 60%. Just quickly, for those who haven't, I encourage you to go to maxlist.org. You'll find a job board there with about 500 job listings a month in Oregon and Washington. And because many jobs never appear on job boards, we also provide content on our blog, a weekly podcast, through events like this, books, and you got a copy of our Portland book, as well as our online courses about the nuts and bolts of job hunting. Because if many of you were probably smarter than me and did go to the Career Services office at university, I didn't, and I learned my job hunting skills by trial and error. And now we try to help people who, like me, are learning by trial and error through our educational content and training events like this. There's also a free weekly newsletter every Tuesday that lists that week's new jobs. So if you just want to find out the latest jobs, go there. And keep an eye on the website, because December 2nd, we're launching a new website. And we're very excited about the new services and resources you'll find. In addition to our sponsor, I want to thank the organizations that tabled this evening. I hope you got a chance to talk with people. We had the School of Journalism and Communications, SEM-PDX, the International Association of Business Communicators, and YNPN. How about a big round of applause for our tablers? So I have a confession. I'm the guy at the family events who says, put away your cell phone. But tonight, bring it out, because we encourage you to tweet. And our hashtag tonight is CommsDisrupt. And if you can also find us on Twitter at MaxList, and our handle is at @Max_list. So here's a quick recap of the schedule. We're going to have a panel discussion. I'll introduce our panelists in a moment. And then we want to hear from you and what's on your mind. So we're going to allow about 30 minutes for questions. We also have a raffle, and I hope everyone had a chance to take part in the networking game. We'll announce, Ben, you're holding up a sign? All right. Okay, if you haven't done so, you still have a chance to turn in your raffle entries. We've got fabulous prizes. There's free Hack the Hidden Job Market course membership. Normally costs about $300. There's a one-on-one meeting with me if you'd like to do an informational interview with me, as well as free admission to our next event. So we will do the raffle drawing at 7:45. And we encourage you to stay after the raffle drawing and continue to network with each other. There's so much wisdom and expertise and knowledge in this room, and you will be amazed. Sometimes the person sitting next to you, if you haven't introduced yourself to him or her, please do so, because they may know about the opportunity that you're interested in or something about the company you want to crack. There's an amazing community here in this space. I also encourage you to ask follow-up questions of our panelists after the formal program comes to an end. So how's all that sound? All right, we ready? Okay. Hold that applause because we're going to introduce our panelists. And let's start with Gail Baker, who's on my left. Gail is the Senior Vice President of Strategic Communications at Cambia Health. She leads corporate and executive messaging, stakeholder and employee communications, as well as public relations, social media, and brand strategy. And she drives strategic communication and engagement with key internal and external constituents. She's an active member of the community, and she's passionate about helping children. She served on several nonprofit boards and committees over the years, including CASA, the Leadership Roundtable, and YWCA of Greater Portland. Next to Gail is Jess Columbo. And Jess, after a decade in public relations, broadcast television, and digital marketing, recently founded her own Portland-based consulting firm. It's called MedEd Digital, and she specializes in social media strategy and training for clients in regulated industries. She's a self-described writer and geek, and Jess is passionate about the intersection of community content and data. She speaks frequently on topics like brand building, social storytelling, and crisis management. Jess also teaches for Portland State University, change of page, and the board of the Healthcare Communicators of Oregon. And finally, she's a member of the American Heart Association's Digital Task Force. Now, to Jess' left is Suzy Frank. Suzy is a public interest communicator. She helps nonprofits and advocacy campaigns and inspires key audiences to action. She's worked for groups ranging from Planned Parenthood of New York City to the Safer Chemicals Healthy Families Coalition, and her current role, she's the Director of Development Communications for the OHSU Foundation. And in that role, she's part of a team that raises more than $150 million a year for OHSU and OHSU Dornbecker's Children's Hospital. That's a big number, 150 million. Yeah. Every year you have to do that. Yeah, okay. No pressure there.
None.
No, okay. And then finally, but not least, is Scott Smith. And Scott's the strategy director for Smith & Connors. Over the course of his career, Scott's crafted compelling content and user experiences for well-known brands, universities, and cultural institutions. He aligns and synthesizes content and messaging with creative concepts to communicate with multiple audiences across media channels. So that's our panel, and we're going to hear from them in a moment, but how about a big round of applause for our panelists tonight? So Donna and I are going to co-moderate, but as Donna is the co-moderator, gets the honor of answering the first question. So Donna, as you know, our theme tonight is disruption in communications. Tell us more about what that means and why this matters. Why should we be talking about this topic?
I love this topic. I teach the Mass Communication and Society class, which is the first class our students take in our program. And it's one of those classes that I have to reimagine and re-engineer every single year. And the first night, I always start with, back when I was an undergrad, I worked with these things called pica rulers and proportion scales. We had these things called typewriters. This is pre-cell phone, pre-computer, pre-internet. I'm not a dinosaur. It was not that long ago. But as rapidly as things have changed in those few decades, it's changing exponentially that much more quickly now. So while I used to work with proportion scales and typewriters and pica rulers, I now work in virtual reality with avatars. The research I do is in VR and augmented reality and understanding how humans exist in these alternative places and the effects it has, especially with people with disabilities. That's the research area I work in. So it's VR. I remember talking to somebody who said, I'm in public relations and I have to know these words called like wikis and podcasts and blogs. And that was in it was in 2004. That's just over a decade ago. Those were new words to us. So today, they continue to change with Snapchat and all of these other technologies in the field of communications that if we don't understand, we don't keep up. If we don't understand our audiences, we don't keep up. So I think it's really, really important that we as communicators are looking at understanding when do you have to maintain the foundation. I mean, if you can't tell a story, it's not going to work in any platform. If you don't have ethics, it's not going to work in any field. So the foundational issues remain the same, but understanding how to develop the content and how to distribute it and to whom gets more complicated all the time.
Well, let's turn to our panel, and I'd like to ask each of you your thought about three things. What's the current state of communications? What kind of changes have you seen in recent years? But to Donna's point, what doesn't change? What are the evergreen things, that the constants that while the tools might change in 5, 10, 15 years, but these are things that people will have to pay attention to a generation from now. Gail, you want to go first? State of communications, what's changing, and
Yes.
what the constants are.
The current state is
Gail,
it's-
can you lean in or pull the
Oh,
mic forward?
okay. Thank you for that reminder.
Yeah.
It's an exciting time to be in this industry, but I think it's an exciting time to be in any industry. I just got back late this afternoon from Phoenix, where I was at a healthcare conference, and guess what the theme was? Disruption in healthcare. So this disruption word is getting a little overused, but it's an exciting time. There's more opportunity to own your own message and control your own message with the disbursement of channels, right? And it's harder to, the traditional earned media is not as important. It is important, but the ability to own your own channels is really given us a lot of opportunity. But the fundamentals are the same, right? You got to go faster. You got to personalize your message more, but the fundamentals are the same. And so I like to think of the fundamentals as what doesn't change is communication needs to be mission-driven. I've had the opportunity to work for mission-driven companies my entire career. And so it's been easy to be a communicator because you ground yourself in the mission of that company. And then you need to be empathetic to who your constituencies, your stakeholders, your audiences, your customers, your members. You need to be empathetic. And I think that's an emerging trend that I want to talk about in a little bit. So you really have to know who that audience is, know who you're communicating with, and truly understand. Put yourself in their shoes. And then you need to have engaging storytelling. Short, concise, engaging messaging, and consistent. And then finally, you need to be authentic and true, and that comes down to the ethics of it, but also, I used to have a saying, and if you read my background, I worked for a company that some of you probably don't know, but the name was Enron. And at the time...
That doesn't ring any bells at
No
all.
bells, no bells, no bells.
Especially no ethics bells.
No, I still have their principles and values framed and on my wall because it's just so funny. But at the time, we were going through, it was crisis communication for 3 years. And we were working for the only ongoing concern, the only company that survived out of the bankruptcy, and we were trying to save our reputation, save ourselves, save the company.
And just for background, Gail, you were doing communications for Portland General Electric,
I
which was part
was
of
the leader
Enron.
of the communications group
Yeah.
for Portland General Electric. And I remember I had a saying, because I would have lawyers and others come into my office and say, "Oh my God, we got to message our way out of this." And I had a sign on my door that said, "You can't communicate yourself out of something you've operated yourself into. If you did it, you have to own it. And we have to talk about it." Thank you. And it's amazing how that was such a foreign idea to people, and still is sometimes. And love the company I'm with now, but I sometimes have to remind some of my business partners that's my fundamental principle. And now they all say it back to me. But so those fundamentals don't say that they do not change. But I think some of the emerging trends that we can talk about, and one of them, it truly is that personalization and that empathy and that human-centered design. And I know some of you are working on UX pieces, but how do you truly understand the N of one, the one person, and how you can communicate with them, how you can engage with them? And people expect that personalization now, and that's our challenge. And it's a blurred, I'm just going way too long.
Go for it.
There's such a blurred line between marketing and consumer experience and communication and customer service and all those disciplines within a company. So much more need to integrate and engage across the silos, because you're not going to be able to work if you can't. You're not going to be able to be successful. That was a long-winded answer.
No,
Let's
but
just close
helpful.
the evening.
Thanks, everybody.
No, Jess, you get the honor of following that. So tell us your thoughts about the current state of communications, what emerging trends you've seen, but what the fundamentals are too. What are the constants that people will still be dealing with?
I do have to say, Jess helps us with some of our communications. So
Yeah. I learned everything I know from Gail. So
no, I've learned everything.
no.
I know.
What's changed and what's stayed the same? Most things have stayed the same. We're all feeling like we're inadequate, that we can't keep up, that there's a race for something, and you don't know when you're going to get there, and if you've made it, and if you need to go take a digital marketing audit class to stay relevant, to keep your foot in the door. Portland is a relationship-based community, and so for the last 12 years, that is what has driven my career. That has never changed. I have continued to be a student of my space, and if you have to figure out what a podcast is, and if you have to learn about this thing called VR, then don't do it. Then don't do it, because that's going to be a painful next 3 years of your career. If you are interested authentically, one, because you think there's money there, cool. Two, because you think, rad, that would be a really interesting thing that piques my interest, or something that I want to talk about with my friends, or want to pursue because I admire that speaker who's talking about that in another context. Excellent. But if you, I'd rather be a student of my space and be perpetually curious. And that is a tremendous weight that was lifted off in the last couple years. Because as you grow in your career, you inevitably move farther away from the work, right? You get out of the trenches. And that is, from a digital marketing and a social marketing specifically, that's terrifying. Because now I don't know the latest tool anymore. I'm not that hot kid that they bring in for the meeting to spit some stats out to, make the client sign on the dotted line. So what added value do I bring? I bring a lot more patience. I bring a lot more maturity. I bring a lot more holistic thinking about what the client needs and when they need it, and when I need to kill my babies creatively, because you need to kill your cool ideas that you're in love with, because they don't have budget for it, or they're not ready for it, right? That's a beautiful, really painful evolution of everybody's career, no matter what, forever and ever. And the empathy piece, I think, that Gail hit on is tremendous. What I have evolved, what has changed for me in terms of the focus on empathy, is that I was all into consumer or end user empathy, and now I realize that to do the work, I need to have empathy with my boss, because I can't get the money that I need unless I make him or her feel less scared to give it to me. So I spend a lot of time, and also in the last 2 years being a consultant, that is perpetually what I'm thinking about. How do I make them feel safer? And that's, again, I need to be ultimately thinking about my member, my patient, my end user. But there's 4 buckets of a traditional content strategy. There's substance, what do you talk about? Structure, how does all the stuff play together across your channels? Integration of your storytelling. Workflow and governance is the people and process piece. That's what nobody has figured out right now. That's the most painful part of our work right now, is that you don't have the money or the resources to do the work that needs to be done right now, that you're reading about, that is the future. But your boss is too scared and isn't ready, and or their boss is not ready to move people around and put them in different roles, or to fire people or to hire new people. You have to move buckets of money and humans around. That's going to take a while. That's a painful process. We know what the work needs to be, and we know what the story should be. And that stuff doesn't change, really. Definitely the tools and the cool, shiny things that we can go after and feel really important talking about in meetings. But the workflow and governance piece, painful. And I think right now we're starting to think about it more, and we're starting to talk about it. I think a dedicated part of my practice right now is putting together really compelling stories to make it easy for people to give me what I need to do the work.
Suzy, we want to hear your thoughts as well. And something unique about your world, you deal with many donors who are older than 65. And so a lot of the disruption that we've seen, particularly in social media, hasn't affected the people that you're trying to reach. They're just not participating, many of them.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because I was joking with one of my colleagues. It's like, okay, well, I spend a good deal of my time marketing to an audience that is 65 and older who have their assistant print out their emails.
Right.
Like, they're not.
So it's a different segment.
You don't?
I mean, the context is, and it's a good idea to spend a lot of time talking to them, because they will give us, maybe they're at the end of their career, they're retired, and they're ready to give us $10 million. And so we will hand deliver so the stuff that we...
You're transcribing these.
That's fine that they're not
by
going
hand.
online. And it's a very personal interaction. But just to piggyback on what these two have already said, which I totally agree with, and I think it's very insightful. These are interesting times in that suddenly it's not just like we're going to broadcast our message and hope people are inspired by it and they're going to pull the lever that we want them to pull. They're actually talking back.
Yeah.
People have platforms now to like tweet back, or they're going to blog about you, or they're going to like talk about your brand in ways that you didn't anticipate. And sometimes that's a really great thing, and you're interacting with them and bringing them along to it's really fun and exciting, and that's new. But I think mostly it's the evergreen skills that are going to get you through no matter what the technology is.
Yep.
And I've seen it time and again, and I've, a 30-year career at this point. It's so, what are the evergreen skills? I mean, I'm highly biased toward writing because I'm just a hopped up writer, really. Solid writing skills. Be a really good writer. Learn how to tell stories, and it's not easy to tell stories. You have to go find the stories and the person who's willing to tell that authentic story, and you have to like run them down and figure out the platform upon which they're going to tell this story and help them through it. That's super time consuming, and of course very gratifying when it works out. Be immersed in strategy. Be a student of strategy. All the rest, the platform doesn't matter. The tools don't matter. It's like, what is the fundamental goal we are going after? We want Congress to tighten regulations on this. In my case, a recent campaign was toxic chemicals in everyday products. How are we going to do that? Who's the audience? Who can pull that? Who can make that happen? Where's the conversation already happening? So be immersed in strategy, and the tactics will come. And then the other thing is be really curious about audience research. This gets overlooked all the time.
Right.
I'm constantly in projects where no one's doing audience research, but I'm going to continue to advocate for it, even though it so rarely happens. audience research is like, you just waste so much time and money if you don't understand who your audience is, what they care about, where they're having a conversation, and where they want to have the conversation. I couldn't emphasize that anymore. And get good at so this is back to storytelling. Get good at interviewing people in different media. And be game about learning new stuff that you're going to not be very good at for a while. I mean, I'm a writer, but, I figured I had to learn I've written flash animations and videos and scripted tweets and...
What's a flash animation?
That's an old-fashioned thing, right? I know you know.
Web
No,
guy
you
humor,
won't.
right.
I earn these white hairs.
But and especially the people in the audience today, but just be willing to try new stuff. Like if someone says, we need a speechwriter, can you write a speech? Just say, yes, I can.
Yep.
I know how to do that.
Yep.
And, okay, that's enough for now.
Great advice.
and be brief.
And if I can probe just a little bit, because I've heard a common theme come up,
Yeah.
which is being able to own the media and produce your own content and put it out there. And then you have these communities of people who have voice that can also be a big part of disruption when the message can get hijacked, if you will, by an audience that has a voice that didn't used to. And I guess I'll throw it to Scott. I mean, even as somebody working in the agency world, how do you address that with clients and help navigate the conversation in a way that people get fired today over hijacked conversations online that didn't used to be an issue.
Yeah, I mean, that scenario is not something that necessarily we've faced with our clients. I think, I want to reiterate what everybody has said, which is that if you really focus on the strategy, number one, and you figure out what it is that you want to say and you do that consistently, and then you focus in an empathetic way on your audience. So you use data and your own empathy, which is, I think, probably the most. The longer I'm in this business, the longer I think that the two skills that you need is a sense of empathy, and which not everybody necessarily has. Well-honed sense of that. Probably a good bullshit detector. I'll add a third one, and then the other one is being a good writer. I think I think you can get a long way by just being honest with people. I mean, I think this idea that if you did it, you have to own it. We're not seeing a lot of examples of that in the public discourse these days. It's the best conversation, one of the best conversations, one of the best memories ever. Never mind. That's a new one today.
I must have missed the news cycle today.
Oh God, yeah, we can talk about it later. But yeah, no, I think if you're authentic with your message and you just stay true to form, and I think you're offering something of value to people. There's always going to be people out there, and yes, you don't control every channel anymore, and there's people who can actually talk back to you in a public way. You can see examples of it every single day. You can see brands that handle it in a respectful way. I mean, you see it with the airlines now all the time. I mean, there's like constant stuff in the media about which airlines are horrible and which ones are not. There's a hashtag about American Airlines right now that's going around. That's a big deal. But then you have other airlines who are able to own it and be able to handle that. So I think, if you stick to that message and you maintain your focus on the mission, and you're respectful to your audiences, and you know who they are and how to talk to them, you're gonna get a long way. I think just one thing, working with a client, and there's been discussion. They have one millennial on staff, And so she's sort of the token millennial in the
Does that make her oldest or youngest?
she's one of the youngest. But it's funny because they look to her as this expert on millennials, as if there's this, exactly. As if
Reverse
there- I heard
mentors, right?
muttering over here, exactly. As if there's like this monolithic group. I think it's ridiculous. I think, she says things like people don't read or millennials don't read. And I'm just like, that's ridiculous. Yeah. You just have to learn how to write better. And write properly for the medium that you're working in. Right. So if you're going to work on the web, then great. If you're going to work, in print, then great. If you're going to do something in, VR, well, then you have to do things a little bit differently. So anyway, it's just, I think, if you think about, just to bring it back around to the original question, I think, the things that are changing are it's constant. And yes, we had typewriters not too long ago, and people read newspapers, but it's but ultimately it comes down to a story and connecting with people. Mm-hmm. And the thing that stays the same is people. They just want they want connection, and they want to hear what they want, and you have to give it to them in a way that works for you.
So there are many reasons I'm excited about this panel tonight. One of the biggest is that we've got so many different kinds of organizations and represented here, and I think they reflect the interests of the audience, because some people want to work for a large corporation, others are interested in nonprofits. Some of you may want to be self-employed and work for yourself, and so we've got those perspectives behind the table. I want to turn to you, Suzy, because we hear from a lot of people who want to work in nonprofit communications, and you're working now for a very big organization, but you've also worked for small ones too. Tell us, and I want to get to the other panelists as well, but Suzy, tell us, how do the communications needs of nonprofits vary from, say, a big organization versus a small one? And how can people position themselves to work for groups like that?
Well, it's a very different experience working for a small nonprofit or like a big national organization. The main difference is budget, how much money you get to spend on stuff, and how big your team is. But the opportunities, I would say the opportunity in starting your career or changing your career to work for a smaller nonprofit is you get to do everything. Yep. So you're talking to reporters, you are writing the copy for the website, you're working with the website designer. If you're lucky, you've got a designer and it's not you.
You might be designing too.
You are making the print brochure, you are tweeting, you are doing everything, and it's an incredible opportunity to learn a bunch of skills, and to learn and to be accountable. Like, it's like down to you. Like, you're making this happen, and you get to be very nimble. Like, there's not that many people who are going to have to sign off on that tweet that you just, you've got to have, there's a lot of freedom. And that's fun, and it has its advantages. And you can see directly the impact that you're having, and you're working very closely with people who are passionate about an issue or a cause, and you're right there next to them. And that's exciting.
So those are the opportunities at a small nonprofit. Now, in a larger one, what's that like?
So the larger one, the fun part is, the scale of what you're doing is huge, and you're part of a big team of really talented people, and you have these big budgets to work with, so you get to work with really great photographers and videographers, and sometimes even illustrators and web designers, and you can launch ambitious campaigns that last over years and have a huge impact. And the difference is that your role tends to get narrower. Like, I have a very narrow role right now. And that's great because it's kind of deep. I can really dig in and do something deeply. I'm not having I'm here, I'm there, I'm making the sign for the bathroom over here, and I'm tweeting.
All welcome.
Right. Right. I'd say those are the big, and that's probably.
Those are great examples. Yeah. Hey, how about you, Jess? You worked in an agency for a time, and now you're out on your own. What's it like being self-employed, and you're a sole practitioner?
This isn't my first class. Yeah. Out of school, I worked with a recruitment firm here in town. I'm born and raised Portland, and they placed me thankfully at a PR agency, and I became a generalist at a PR agency, and I cut clips and I tried to glue things, and I'm not very good at even cuts, and I was I did anything that was asked of me, and was humble about that, and that's a beautiful thing to experience, is to be really bad at something for a prolonged period of time, and to have an opportunity to touch a lot of things, and to be that generalist, because then you go into, I would go client side, agency, client side, now as an entrepreneur, and I remember going into one client side where the IT department and the marketing department, and never the tween did meet, and I was this new thing called a social media digital marketing person who could speak both languages. And if you can hang out and talk to IT people, that's a beautiful thing. They will be your best friends, and they're brilliant humans who are, you know, it's been a wonderful experience to have all of those touches early in my career. Now as an entrepreneur, it's hard work.
Pluses and minuses?
Yes. Okay. Pluses. I say when I work and who I work for, or my budget does, or my mortgage does, but also my heart does. And I get to put stakes in the ground and to talk really loudly about things that I think are important without any consideration for politics or somebody else's company that I want to be really conscientious of, and rightly so. I get to decide what to put a stake in the ground around, and how to bring up junior people under and mentor and grow those people, which has been tremendously valuable and rewarding to me. What has been challenging is trying to figure out where your personal life fits in and where your self-care fits in. And to have starting a company and the apocalypse of last November happen, you know, in quick succession, every mental health person in this city is booked. It's a hard time to be a human. Coupled with, I'm just on the grind in a different way. And it's a beautiful grind because you're motivated in a different way. But has been arguably more important. The community piece has been more important. And figuring out if you feel comfortable selling yourself. My ego obviously allows me to sit up here pretty comfortably. Not everybody likes to do that, but somebody's got to sell the work and go get the work. And I love to do that, which means I got to hire somebody else to be the COO because I don't know how to use Excel spreadsheets very well. So really being real with yourself about where your strengths lie, and being really honest with yourself going in about kind of where your capacity is emotionally. And that's been a tremendous growth opportunity for me in the last couple years.
If I can expand on that a little bit, we hear a lot the word multidisciplinary is one of those hot words, I think, and we wear many hats, so I think we have to be interdisciplinary as professionals. But who do you think your most important partners are when it comes to the job you do and the job that needs to get done?
My CPA, that's my accountant. Who else?
Yeah.
Well, I think things are very specialized.
Right.
I'm lucky enough to have two partners in my business, so I'm not, and I would probably crawl under my bed if I had to run this business alone. So I commend you. It's very brave, but we're lucky because we have. I do strategy. One of my partners is the technology person. The other one does design. And then in terms of running the business, because you really kind of have you're really doing two things at the same time. You're running a business, which is huge, and then you're also doing the work, which is huge. And so in the business, I'm very good at the operations stuff, and I'm the IT guy. I kind of love that stuff.
Let's hang out. Yeah.
I'm like, let me look at routers on the internet for an afternoon, and and one of my partners is really good at the sort of marketing, and she's really good at sort of going out there and people. She's good at talking to human beings, so that's a really good skill. And my other partner is she has a finance degree, so we're really lucky. But what we also find is that one of the advantages of, I think, the current climate, and also so this is part of the disruption, is that things are very, I mean, the good thing is that because there's no typewriters anymore, and because there's a cloud, you can work anywhere. I mean, this is the age of the virtual agency. I don't personally, I wouldn't want to do that because I do actually like talking to other human beings. We're
Face-to-face
working
even.
with them, yeah, face to face, right? Exactly. But there's an opportunity to work with really talented people, and if you get a budget, whether you're in-house or you're on the agency side, if you're working on a website and you decide that you have this creative idea and you want it to be full of illustrations, well, I mean, we're in Portland.
Yep.
I mean, this town is full of creatives. There's like 200 agencies here. It's insane. And there's so much talent. There's enough to like feed all those agencies. It's very competitive. This is actually, if you're a creative now, this is an amazing time for you to like go get a job. There's so many, like 3 of my friends just opened agencies. It's ridiculous. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Do you
But they're
feel
all
like,
successful. They're all happy.
So, okay, so I was going to say, is there enough to go around, and or it's getting harder and harder to figure out where your differentiation, where your value prop is in the pretty crowded marketplace?
I think that's the hardest part, because I mean that's the cardinal rule of a business, right?
Yeah.
You have to figure out that's what we preach to our clients is differentiation and positioning. And if there's 200 agencies in a city, some of them specialize in PR, otherwise, some of them things are blurring and separating, I think, at the same time. But I think there is an opportunity you have to really, I think this is true probably as a job, as a person looking for a job as well, is you have to really think about what you offer that's special. And I think as an entrepreneur, you're like made up of people. You're not, and I think we made the mistake very early on of like pretending to be something that we weren't. We were pretending to be something bigger. We were kind of we're hiding the brushstrokes. And I think once we stepped back and we kind of like all sat down together and got the Post-it notes out and tried to we did the appendix surgery on ourselves. Then we realized that this is what we really care about. And once we really doubled down on that, it clicked, and our clients started to see. I mean, it's about being authentic. It's like people smell it. It's not hard to smell that out. So
which means you say no to work.
Yes,
and
which is
you say
great.
no to clients.
What a good
and
feeling.
You say no to your boss sometimes.
That's
if
right.
That doesn't feel right.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
So
kind of on a related note, it's about being authentic and who you like to partner with too. It's like know what you're good at. So like maybe Scott and I, we know writing is probably a core skill, but learn how to collaborate with people who have very opposite skill sets. Like my sweet spot is when I get to sit down with a visual person and we're going to like plan something out. We're going to create a concept, so it may be a graphic designer, maybe a photographer, and there's people on my team who are really great at this, and together we're really getting good at collaborating. And then the other key ingredient for me, knowing my weaknesses and strengths, is a project manager, like a really good.
Hello. Yeah.
we hired
Yeah,
a producer, and it
That's
changed
the
everything.
best
We didn't
thing
have to
in the
do all
world.
that.
Someone who's like they're not trying to be the creative. They're not. They are the project manager, and that is a very distinct skill set. But
Totally.
anyway, be authentic to what are you good at, and you have to. It takes practice. You don't know how to do it out of the gate. How do you successfully? If you're a writer, how do you even work with a photographer or a designer? It takes some experience. It takes a little bit of time, and then like maybe someday you can operate as a creative director, and when you're orchestrating the whole thing, and that's the best part.
Well, you brought up jobs and occupations. Let's talk about job hunting. And I want to turn to Gail and Suzy, because you both work at large organizations that people want to find positions at. Gail, you're at Cambia, and then Suzy, you're at OHSU's foundation. What advice do you have for people who are looking for positions where there's a lot of competition because it's such a desirable employer? How can people crack the Cambia code or OHSU?
Well, I think first and foremost, and every single person here has said it, for me, I'm prejudiced to good writers. And so having that experience and being able to demonstrate that, being enthusiastic, demonstrating that you're curious, and demonstrating that I figure I can teach people to do the technical stuff, to learn the technology. I'm looking for someone who can write, because if you can write, you can think, and if you can think, you can be strategic, and you can write a strategic plan. And so that's what I want demonstrated. And I'm looking for someone who's just willing to take a risk and be out there and fail forward and learn from it. And so that's what I'm looking for when we're out looking for folks. And Tamira's here. How long have you worked for us, Tamira? 6 months, and she's awesome, and she's demonstrated all of those things.
Yes, she is.
Believe me. So that's, I think, what I look for. I look for diversity, diversity of thought, diversity of background, diversity of ethnicity. We want our team to reflect our community. And so we put a lot of effort into making sure that happens. But generally, I just think you come in with energy and creativity, and you have that foundational skill of writing and strategy. You can go anywhere. And I am also a believer in being a generalist. Mm-hmm. And if you come in and say, I'm social media, I've had this happen. I'm social media, and I want to be the vice president of social media. I'm like, well, you know what? Probably in the next decade, we will not have a vice president of social media. So you're really good at social media, and you need to branch out. Mm-hmm. Because if you want to manage people and move up we're not big enough to have a vice president of social media. So you need to figure out how to broaden your interest and your skill set. And so we really pushed, you've got to be a generalist. But I think that's a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah. Just
Not
quickly,
one.
I imagine people in the audience are thinking this, well, I'm all those things, and I send in an application, and I don't hear back. What are, say, your top 2 best tips, Gail, for somebody who has those qualities? How do you, when you are reviewing application materials, what do you look for? What should people say or do to demonstrate that they are indeed creative, good at writing, they're a journalist, and they've got the energy that's going to
pay attention to your resume and write me a letter.
Okay.
If you are applying for a communication position and you don't write a cover letter, your resume goes in the garbage can immediately. Yes. Because that is what you're going to sell yourself. Right. And if you're not selling yourself, I don't care what your background is. You can't take the time. So that's number 1. And I know that's old school, but it's...
Totally agree.
It is, for me, a deal breaker. We hire interns, and we've had multiple interns that have come in and proven themselves and gotten their first job from after being an intern. So that's, again, you don't have to know anything. I mean, we hire really good interns that already have experience, but then they show their curiosity and their enthusiasm, their ability to write, their ability to learn, their ability to jump in and be fearless, which to me I love fearlessness. Tamira's fearless. So I think that's another one. Now, usually the resumes I'm looking at now aren't entry-level resumes, right? So when I'm looking for someone at a higher level position, I love some of the agency experience, nonprofit experience, corporate experience, and kind of that breadth of experience I think is really important.
Okay. Let's turn to you, Susie, and then it's about a quarter after the hour, so we're going to open it up to questions. But again, what advice do you have for somebody who wants to get into a highly desirable employer like yours?
I would just second what Gail was saying about that cover letter. That is key for when we are looking at new candidates, especially for communications job. You got to nail that cover letter, and it's got to say, I really want to work for OHSU because I specifically want to work for you, and here are the skills that I think I could bring to this worthy work that you are doing, and I know about your work, and I've done my homework, and let me show you how I've done my homework. And then the second thing is really strong samples, whether it be graphic design or photography or writing. I know more about the writing samples, but even if you haven't had a job where writing was part of your responsibility, at this point, there's so many platforms upon which you can write, you can blog, you can do, write, show me your writing that you've done, even though it wasn't for a paying client. That will still do. And don't have any typos in your cover letter or your resume. That's a deal,
Please.
total deal breaker.
Yep.
Yeah,
I
and-
see a lot of people that aren't working their LinkedIn hard enough, and I am,
I'm one of those.
Yeah,
I'm one of those as well.
I work the hell out of my LinkedIn, and it has paid off in clients, recruits, partnerships. One, have an updated profile with a professional photo that doesn't have your dog or a glass of wine in it. Two, be sharing content that is of value every so often. It doesn't have to be original works, but I believe that you have original works in your brain. You have opinions about the work that's happening in the industry. Say something about it, and blow some smoke if it is true or not. I go hard and be really generous to your network. So I had a mentor once when I was first starting my business that said, if you get up in the morning and have a cup of coffee and scan for opportunities, who does that? You just get up and start grinding. But as you do that and you're petting your cat and you're drinking your coffee and you're scanning the interwebs for opportunities, for every opportunity that doesn't feel right to you, give it intentionally to somebody in your network. And I work really hard to be really generous to my network because the universe is one of abundance. And this Portland is a small town. The Northwest is a really lovely small town, and that has paid off tremendously for me as a job seeker and a recruiter.
I totally agree with that. I mean, when I was first starting out as a freelancer in this town, and I had almost no experience in communications. I was a writer, but people gave of their time, and people who at now I realize that I can't believe I even asked them for help or even for coffee, but I just didn't know, thankfully. Yeah. And nobody turned me down. I mean, it was amazing. This is a very generous town, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and hopefully that doesn't change.
We're going to turn it over to you all for questions, and Donna's got the microphone. And we've got about 30 minutes together with our panel, and we want to hear from you all. Who would like to ask the first question?
Ooh, pressure.
If you could just mention your name just before you ask your question.
Hi, my name's Brian. I've spoken on radio, and that always sounds weird.
Yeah.
Is there a point where disruption will be too much? That's all I wrote down for my question. But is there a point where maybe we shouldn't try to be disrupting industries or anything, and just to sort of work with what we have or hone what we have?
Mm-hmm.
That's all. Thank you.
Can I just say something real quick about that? I have a particular I have a real problem with a lot of startup culture right now, and you might have heard about like Bodega. Did you see that one? Yeah, it's basically like an updated vending machine, but the whole idea is to like put, I mean, don't call it Bodega. If you're going to, it's just so dumb, bad branding. I mean, you're just asking for it. But I think it's emblematic of a lot of this mindset in Silicon Valley of like, let's disrupt it. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. Right. There is a sense of there should be a sense of community in the things that you're doing, and that's something that we think about a lot and we talk about a lot in our business, which is this idea of being able to turn away business. I don't want to work for companies that are disrupting industries for no reason. Uber is. I mean, you can see it. I mean, there are these endemic, sort of cancers at the heart, ethical cancers at the heart of a lot of these companies, and so I more and more appreciate companies that are not disrupting, unless it's something that's going to actually solve big problems for society, because we're screwed. So it's really helpful if people do that.
And I would add to that is one of the things, because I work in healthcare, and healthcare is, if there is no industry that is more human than healthcare, but also no industry that is more complex than healthcare, and sometimes cold and inhumane. And one of the things that we talk about in disruption is technology is going to really, that disruptive technology, whether it be augmented intelligence, big data, diagnosing your genetic code so they know what diseases you're going to have, that's all really wonderful and all really scary, and ultimately it has to be human. Mm-hmm. It's a human to human. And so you've got to take technology as your backbone, but wrap it in humanity. Mm-hmm. And so that's what my company tries to do every day. Mm-hmm. How do you disrupt to make the experience better for humans, people and their families, make it easier, make it more affordable, make it a more caring experience? And you're going to use technology to do that, and you're going to use big data to do that, and you're going to use chatbots to do that. And you're going to use humans to do that as well.
The technology might be the spine.
Yeah, it's
but
the
humanity is the DNA.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Yeah,
Good.
that was broader than communications. So sorry.
It's okay. We have a question in the
Healthcare was
back.
so complicated.
Hi, thank you. I just spilled my wine glass. Thankfully, it's empty. It was disrupted. My name is Jesse. Thank you for those wonderful presentations. I'm curious, are any of you familiar with Jill Lepore's article in The New Yorker called The Disruption Machine? It's a really fascinating article that came out a few years ago. And her point, Lepore is a professor at Harvard, was that disruption is a theoretical model for explaining why businesses fail, but it's not good at all as a predictive tool. Mm-hmm. And we've fallen back to this term because we have all of this anxiety and fear about the future and how things will change. And so we make recourse to the term disruption. But we really don't know how they'll change. And I'm interested in, from a communication standpoint, in your professional capacities, for the place of emotion, for the place of things like fear and anxiety, which of course predominate right now, and how that's managed in terms of this conversation about disruption. Thanks.
If I can respond briefly. I just came back from Liverpool, where I was at a National Science Foundation meeting with the Economic Social Research Council, which is Europe's version of the NSF, talking about the future of disruption and what it means to be human in the digital age. And they talked about automation and what's coming with jobs and automation as a disruptive issue, and what's going to happen to the humans when the machine is taking the job. And they talked about the idea that the machines were going to create a luxury class or a leisure class, and went on and on about how it was going to make our life better. And the quote that they used, they then showed, was from the 1950s. Mm-hmm. So disruption is not new. Right. As we went from the agricultural society to the industrial society to where we are in technology and what's disrupting now, there's always been disruption. It's just happening at a faster rate. And there's still so much we don't know. But I think that the point being that it goes back to know the foundation, have your foundational skills, be a good human being. Care about other human beings, and keep the human at the center of everything that you do, but be flexible and understand when disruption is coming. What skills do you have that can help you navigate that change, and how do you stay with it in a way that you don't drown? I mean, it's like staying up on LinkedIn. Between Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook and all of the other social platforms, my social identity and brand is not where I would tell my students theirs should be, just because I don't have time. But my social brand isn't critical to my future success as a professor either. So it's looking at what your priorities are, what your needs are, who you work for, what are you trying to do, and being sure that you're really good at the few things that you have to do to be able to do your work well, have a job, do it well, and make a difference.
Do you mind if I build on that? Because that's a really good question. And one of the things I think in this day and age where things are changing, and it really is going to be the people who will be able to maneuver. It's the difference between kind of transactional leadership and transformational leadership. And I don't know if you've studied that at all, but I would like to think of it as, and Mac, you'll know this example because we were in a class together.
We were.
Yeah. And I love this example, is think about yourself as playing a basketball game. And if you're a really, really good basketball player and you can dribble and you can throw the ball and you can make the basket, that's great. You're a good basketball player. Those are the transactions. But if you're going to be a truly great basketball player, you can play the game and you can stand up in the audience and you can watch the game being played and you can predict where the next play is going to be. And so when we start thinking about the skills that are going to take us into the future, whether you're in communications or politics or healthcare or technology, really, yes, you have to be a good transactor. You have to know how to do what you do, but you have to hone the ability to take a step back and see where the game is going, or at least predict it where you can be, and that's that transformational leadership. And a key part of that is understanding your ecosystem, understanding your constituents, your stakeholders. And I always think when I listen to the classes in when I go to the talks about transformational leadership and read the books about it, because I'm kind of a organizational leadership wonk, and it reminds me of my first class in communications. It really is. It's like really, really know who you're talking to before you walk in the room, which is really be empathetic, know your ecosystem, and then craft your strategy.
So it's like context is king. Content and distribution are its multiple wives. But
I would add quickly, if you're a leadership nerd like Gail and I, the book I think you might be thinking of is Leadership on the Line by Ron Heifetz and Marty Linsky.
Look at you, Mac.
Hey.
I read the
Leadership
syllabus.
on the Line.
Yeah. Right.
Hi, I'm Samantha. So my question, you talked about the one millennial at the company. So I'd like to ask, what do you think about millennials sort of in this topic of disruption and our role in that? I'm graduating college soon and I want to enter this workforce. And so what do we have to do to convince you that we're more than just like the social media VP or whatever?
It's not so bad, actually.
Well, I'm the mother of a millennial, and she thinks you're getting a really bad rap. And she really doesn't like the stereotypes about millennials, and which I won't repeat what they are, but I think what you can do, I mean, just show accountability, show a willingness to learn new things without being told what to do, and not to repeat a stereotype. Yeah, I think it's just accountability, willingness to work hard, willingness to try things without being shown what to do would be the great first step for anyone of any age trying to get a job.
The onus is actually, I'm a millennial as well. I'm on the other end of that. And the onus is on everybody talking crap about millennials. Millennials just know you have that going in that you need to overcome, right? That you've got to prove them wrong. And it's lazy for us to be talking like that. And it makes for a good LinkedIn article. Right? I mean, it's a great keyword. But the onus is on us as hiring and mentors and colleagues to be more generous. Because, and I work a lot in lead gen and recruitment and targeting, and in the paid space, you need really clear variables that I'm going after. A 65-year-old who loves Ellen and drinks Coca-Cola and has like banana boat because I got a dermatology thing that I'm going after, right? And all of that is very minimizing and short-sighted and on a lot of accounts. And so I continue to be surprised by my communities that I manage and that I'm a part of in this really beautiful way, because that's also a humbling experience over and over again, that I make assumptions about groups of humans, and then they check me publicly sometimes, and then I'm like, sorry. So I think it's an opportunity for all of us to be more generous with one another, and for you to do what we all did, which was to get in there and get your hands dirty and say yes to anything that's asked of you, the way we have all done. So I really appreciate your question.
I love millennials. And when I started in the job that I have now 5 years ago, there was no millennials. And so I restructured to be able to bring interns in, to have coordinator roles, split up higher level positions so I could have that entry level position to bring a new set of folks into the room. And it has taken the energy out of the roof. And it has, and the people that we have working together and the creativity that's brought onto the team has been amazing. And I will continue to constantly, and that goes to the diversity too. You want to have a across the board age, gender, which gender's harder because now there's a lot of women, and I'm always going, at least get a couple of guys in here that we can interview, because it's for some reason it's getting harder and harder. But the other thing I'll share with you, because I go back to I was listening to David Gergen. You know David Gergen? He's on CNN all the time talking about politics. He was speaking at this conference that I was at, and I tweeted this out, and I don't tweet a lot, but I tweeted this statement out because he was talking about millennials and the state that we're in right now and the disruption that we're in politically and the divide in the country. And he said, the millennials are going to save the day. He said the millennials are like the Great Generation. They're a bigger generation than any other generation we've ever seen, and they are more like the Great Generation of World War II, the people that gave back to the community and were really focused on the community and giving back and not about themselves. And he said he truly believes that the millennials are going to save the day. So I left feeling heartened, and I will hire more millennials because they're going to save the day.
I just want to second that. The boomers, and I'm a Generation X, we screwed everything up. The boomers really screwed everything up. They shrink wrapped everything, and everything was convenience. And we were, we grew up in the 80s and it's just lame. So, but I'm really, I think
but the hair was great.
What?
The hair was great.
The hair was great. Yeah.
Don't forget the shoulder pads.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
I still have
It's time to pull them out. Yeah. But I am impressed. I mean, we employ 2 millennials in our, again, I cringe to even sort of say that because they're human, they're people, and what makes them, and we've hired 3 and 1 didn't work out, but the other 2 are amazing because because as people they're enthusiastic, they are curious, they're excited about being in the industry that they're in, and they're young. I mean, they're starting out in their careers. So I think I think that's true. I think it was ever thus that young people provided energy in institutions that needed energy. I think and I agree with you. I think that there's a sense of generation. We faced nothing. The AIDS epidemic, but besides that, I mean, things were great for like 20 years, so, a couple little bumps. Now, there's going to be probably real adversity coming, and I'm hopeful, and I plan on hiring more as well, so collect them all.
Yeah, and then the other thing I think, We'll fight for them. The other thing I think, and this is that I see the there's a fearlessness, a risk taking that is that I see that happens that I think is really important. As long as you're failing, you're willing to take a risk and fail and learn from it and get back up. As long as it's not reckless risk, it's a good thing. And I don't think growing up and going to college and getting my first job, that wasn't encouraged. It wasn't at all.
Right.
That was something I had to learn later in my career, that it was okay to step out and fall flat on my face. And I fall flat on my face a lot.
Yeah. I think most successful people do. They fail often and frequently. Question in the back.
Hi, my name's Brian. I'm not related to this Brian here that I know of. I feel like one of the big issues with disruption is we talked about everyone having their own channel, and the news cycle used to be 24 hours. Now it's like 20 minutes. There's just so much clutter out there. What are your strategies for getting your message through that clutter, so even if you create some compelling content, that it doesn't get missed, and without just bombarding people on social media and email and that sort of thing? So I wonder just how you kind of tackle that in this age. Thanks.
Can I just really quick? I think there's no way around it. You have to call it content because it's, but part of me cringes at this idea of like, what do you make? I make content. It's kind of, unfortunate term. I think, but I think the fact is that you are making content, but if you are consistent, I think you have to come down to the consistency of messaging, and if you just keep at it. I mean, I think that there's a lot of dilution in messaging at a lot of companies and institutions and organizations. They're trying to do trying to say too much. I think there's opportunity to coordinate messaging with, especially at mission-based organizations, to sort of get together and have that sort of, there's a lot of competition for space where there doesn't necessarily have to be, in my opinion. But I think it's really just, I think, we do a lot of branding, and the thing that we always preach about branding is that it's really kind of just like, banging the same hammer over and over and over again. You're going to do it in a lot of different ways, but if you don't just like keep repeating yourself over and over again, you're not going to break through. You just have to have some patience. You have to do it better than other people, but I think ultimately if you're patient and you do it well, you have to have some faith in your audiences if you're,
I'll just add to that. And it is, I agree, you have to keep repeating the same message over and over, even though when you're the messenger, it gets really tedious. And you think, isn't everyone tired of this? But no, actually they're not, because they haven't half heard it yet. But and also targeting comes into play here. How do you cut through the clutter? You have to be talking to a very specific audience about stuff that they're already kind of interested in. And just be entertaining, be fresh, be authentic. There's nothing, although my bio is kind of dull, there's almost no platform upon which it's not a good idea to be kind of playful and entertaining, and that's a good way to cut through. I don't know, there's a million other ways to cut through, but I'd say targeting, authentic, and repeat yourself over and over again.
Swear a lot.
Yes, only we weren't being taped.
Get budget. You need money to put it in the digital space. You need money, and I'm so tired of 10 years of doing social media with no budget. We're getting there though. We're moving it more intentionally, which is really awesome. And that means you got to tell stories out of data. You have to report back and be able to tell a compelling ROI story to get you more money, because that targeting piece is hyper relevant. And I love what Suzy's saying about right message at the right time to the right human. So awareness, consideration, acquisition or conversion, and then loyalty or advocacy, right? There's that funnel, traditional funnel that someone has in a purchase or kind of engagement with you. And if you hit them at the awareness stage with a message that they're not ready for yet, then you might as well have just thrown away $100 in the street and give it to a nice person that probably needs it out on our streets. But understanding where they're at in their relationship with your brand, and then doing hyper segmentation and personalization with some smart dollars behind it. It's just more work. It's more science behind our art. which is cool.
You guys got it.
So
say
we got about 5.
personalization.
Oh, I'm sorry, Gail, go ahead.
Oh, personalization, building your community, the authenticity, having other people deliver your message.
Oh, yes.
Right? So
The right
oft-
messenger, yeah.
oftentimes you're not the best person to deliver your message, so find someone else who's going to get attention. I'm going to brag. It took me a year, but we got on Harvard Business Review in this issue.
That's right.
And to have the Harvard Business Review use your company and your CEO as an example of innovation, and you're in the first paragraph, nothing speaks louder than that.
Right.
You know, and I can poo-poo, earned media's dead, but that is so powerful.
Yep.
So, and it was a year, I mean, literally a year and a half in the making. And so those pieces, that third-party validation of what you do is really powerful. Because I often say, I can tweet out, or we can blog and we can LinkedIn, and we all just like it in our own little vacuum, and we can have engagement measurements and impression measurements, but is it the right people? And is it making an impact? And so, and not, I mean, it is not, they're not balls out of the park very often, but every once in a while, you get a ball out of the park.
And I would just add, this is a job skill. Like I've worked on campaigns where that's almost all I did was go find the right messengers for maybe it's something controversial or technical or dry, or mostly controversial. So you have to have the right messenger to deliver that message. And it takes a lot of time to find them and to work with them and get them to
build it.
talk. But once you have that third-party validation, as you're saying, and an authentic voice with a story even, that's maybe even slightly entertaining, then that's like solid gold. That takes a lot of work, but if you can learn how to do that or put yourself in position to be doing that,
It is more
really-
time-consuming than most people
it's a huge amount of work.
that will take to do it.
Well, we have about 3 minutes left, so we have time for one more question. Do we have a question in the back or in the front? I think you had your hand up first. So.
Hi, my name is Scott. Kind of a two-part question. You sort of started to answer both parts in the last question. So social media, when I hear disruption and communication, I think social media. I see a lot of social media in job advertisements. So the question is, what do you really think is the value proposition of social media? You know, is there really a value proposition there? Is it big or small? The second part is related, and you're in the word and picture game. How do you measure the impact of what you're doing when you're talking to clients or anyone else?
It's a beast.
Do you have an hour?
Right.
2 minutes.
I don't know.
2
I'll let
parts.
people that specialize in social media answer that question.
Please,
man.
Jess.
First of all, if anybody, don't let them call you an expert or a guru or a ninja, because then you're just an a-hole, because you should be a student. But I am a student of social, and the beautiful thing about digital and social is how trackable and measurable and how creepy trackable it is. So most of the folks that I work with that aren't showing ROI, it's because they haven't put in the work or don't know what they don't know in terms of implementing some tracking mechanisms, some pretty basic ones around Facebook pixels or custom UTM parameters or something in your advertising, so that you can go into your back-end Google Analytics and say, here's the people that came to site who went deeper into my brand experience and what they did once they got there. Did they convert? Did they come back later and purchase? What did they do? And there's different, obviously that's a one-way stream of tracking, but there's a really disciplined practice of measurement that people aren't digging into in the social space, and it's a missed opportunity. More than that, what I work with younger folks on in terms of measurement is they can pull data like crazy. They're GA certified, but they can't pull the qualitative, really compelling story out of the data. So you tell me that a quarter of my web page visitors came from Asia and I have no person of color on my homepage, that's a problem to me, right? But that's a dual step. That's the GA data point, and then the creating some sort of hypothesis or, guesstimation out of that, saying what if? And that's a beautiful thing that you get, I think, in you 3 to 5 years into the social kind of profession. The value prop of social is meaty. I'm going to be really try to be quick. My master's degree is in digital communication and how it is different, and the value prop is different than any other media entity. And the 3 psychosocial values that you're looking to satisfy as a human when you go on the internet: information seeking, you want to WebMD and Google everything. You want a social support. Did you have trouble getting your kid to sleep last night? I did too. How do you deal with that? And emotional disclosure. I want to tell people how I feel about everything, and I want to take pictures of my lunch and tell you what that makes me think about. Those are very intrinsic human things that you don't get when you turn on a television or a radio. I would say that it's deep and it's wide, and we're barely scratching the surface. And that's digital holistically. Social has become a trash can in a lot of spaces, and so you got to figure out when it is adding value to your life and when it's sucking it. And there's plenty of psychology studies coming out that say that I might have trouble as a professional social media practitioner in the long run. I do have a physician to help me with that.
Well said.
TMI. I think, yeah, the ad val for you and the value prop is that it's a hyper-personalized space for you. And so I think dose yourself accordingly. Right.
All right. That's a great spot to close on. So please join me in thanking our panelists. All right, and they will be here to, if you'd like to chat with them one-on-one, and our networking will continue after the event. I also would like to ask for another round of applause for our host of the University of Oregon and the School of Journalism and Communications.